Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name's Steve, and it is time to look at some draft strategy. 12-team league, picks 1 through 4 to start off your draft. Early round, what are we looking to do? And a couple caveats here, guys. Look, there might be a player that's not on this list that you like taking at that portion of the draft. That's fine. Go right ahead and take them. They just didn't make the cut for the range within what I'm looking at, which I will explain a little bit more shortly. For instance here, a guy like CeeDee Lamb, I like over Justin Jefferson. I like taking him. Second overall, Ja'Marr Chase, CeeDee Lamb are my top two if I'm just having to put a straight list together. Because generally I like taking wide receiver first in this draft in the first round. But I've drafted some teams with running back first, and I've really liked those teams, so I don't want to push that point too much. We'll just take CeeDee Lamb off the board here for now because he didn't make the cut, but I wanted to make that example. Now, look, if you want some real practice for your mock drafting, some real practice, you can come and join us on this channel. Tuesdays, Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've been doing mock drafts. We have enough people to make a full room, so no bots. We're right there. Just show up, and then we can get that going. And we've been having a good time. So with this draft, what you're seeing on the board, I want to point out, you can do exactly what I did, what I'm going to be talking to you. You have the same resource that I used in order to create my draft strategy in this video that I am suggesting, or strategies that I am suggesting. At the end of the day here, I'm going to present you 3 different boards, and you can make your own decision on which one you thought was the strongest team out of the bunch. But this is the information that you need here. I'm going to give you my opinion, for instance, on the quarterbacks and the tight ends in a little bit about how viable of a strategy I is to be taking 1 to none of those in the first 7 rounds when you're drafting from this area of the draft, based on who is supposed to be available and when they're supposed to be available, and my opinions on drafting them at that point in the draft. You might have some different opinions on that, and that's okay. Every draft strategy is viable. At the end of the day, you win the league or you lose the league because of the players that you picked, not necessarily because of the draft strategy that you used. They can all win, they can all lose. The players are the most important part, and that's why you want to try to stay liquid and not go in with too preset of a plan. But we're going to do a little bit of a preset plan because we want to set ourselves up when it comes to rounds 4 and 5, when it comes to rounds 6 and 7, these middle round important picks. We want to set ourselves up so that way we're not backed into a corner and not able to take something that we think is worth drafting at that point in the draft, because we need to draft a running back. We haven't drafted any running backs yet because we need to get another wide receiver. We've drafted too many running backs already. We popped off on a quarterback. We need a wide receiver, and we don't really like what's available. We don't want to run into that. So that is the goal with this video, in theory, is to set ourselves up for these mid-round picks by doing smart things with our first-round picks. So, what's the color scaling going on here? Hopefully it's fairly intuitive. I've got the ranges here. So we're going to look at Jalen Waddle as an example to explain a bunch of this. Rounds 6 and 7, Jalen Waddle's here in the orange color code. Anybody who is in ADP from 2 sources, ADPs are taken from Sleeper and Fantasy Pros website for half PPR. Anybody has an ADP between 69 and 76.9. Those players, they're within that 8-pick range that you would have if you drafted from picks 1 through 4 through that turn around picks 6 and 7. So those are the players who are going to be in yellow. They're in the range of players that are typically drafted at this point according to ADP. Now, when you do your drafts, things aren't going to work out perfectly like this because ADP is the average. If you take the average of 101, it's 50. Now, the odds of that player, if they're being taken first overall and 100th overall, the odds of them being taken 50th actually aren't that great. They're either being taken right away or they're being taken much later. They're likely not available there. So you have to remember that averages are averages. Of course, a lot of these players, none of them is that the actual separation of their draft picks, but some of them do have more variance. And the other thing to remember is, let's take a guy like Xavier Worthy, Kansas City. If you're drafting in Kansas City with a bunch of local Kansas City fans, Xavier Worthy's probably going to be going higher than he does via ADP, because you know there's at least those one or two guys in your league who just want every Kansas City player on their roster, and they'll take them no matter what round it is. It doesn't matter. They're just drafting all Kansas City players. It doesn't matter their ADP. So you have to take those things into account. If you want Xavier Worthy in that league, you're probably going to have to pop off on him earlier than this, maybe early round 5, late round 3, something like that. So we got our idea of what's in range. Anybody in orange is going to be less likely. They're often taken prior to that range or within that range, somewhere in that area. And then the players in red, they're still within this range. They're not too far off from being available. However, I shouldn't say they're not within the 69 to 79 range. They would actually be within 67, 66, like 64 to 65th ADP would have been the players around the 6-7 turn that are going to be in red, and then they would have had to have been less than 65.9 ADP on both platforms in order to stay red. Now you see a guy like Mike Evans here, red to orange. On one platform, he was closer to ADP. On the other platform, he was a little bit further away, or maybe even much further away, but he was outside of that close range. Waddle, for instance, another way that you could have an orange range if you were just outside of pick 69, a little bit earlier than that on both platforms. Or if on one platform you're outside of that, and on one platform he was in range, then he would have gotten an orange color coding here. And the exact opposite is working on the other side. Green, I say possibly on here, probably available according to ADP. Likely available. Anybody in blue is, further outside that range, but within the range that I did to come up with these lists on at least one of those two platforms. So there you go. You get the color coding, once again, fairly intuitive, but when we're looking at these, who do we expect to be available, starts off with the yellow, Rashee Rice, orange to yellow, on that borderline. If you're going to draft him, you're probably going to have to draft him with that late fourth round pick, instead of that early fifth round pick, because he might go in between those two picks otherwise, or would be almost likely to go within those two picks. Even same with these guys, could very likely go within those picks in your league. And when you're drafting around the corners, I always try to keep an eye on what positions your opponents have drafted. If one of your opponents went 0 RB, and you're coming around to the 8th round draft pick, and you're picking between a running back and a wide receiver, you probably go with that running back, because that person who went 0 RB is smashing running backs currently, and they might take one of your running back prospects that you really, really like, and then choose a wide receiver with that next pick in the early 9th round in that example. So with that all said, let's get to talking about the quarterbacks and the tight ends first. Is there an area of the draft, when you're drafting from this portion of the draft, that taking a quarterback, taking a tight end makes a lot of sense? The short answer for me is not really. Starting off with this 2-3 turn, McBride, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are all within range. Personally, I just think the value of a lot of these wide receivers, pretty much most all of these running backs, is just greater. I'm not passing up on those guys for a quarterback or a tight end at this point in the draft. It's just a little bit too early for me, when I might be able to get a Kittle or something later. Of course, if you are stuck on getting tight end, well, then maybe McBride, at least he's going within that range, so you could get him here. I just don't agree with that myself, but you could take one. You're not going to want to take both a quarterback and tight end. You got to get at least one of these other players that's going to be available for you at this point in the draft, almost certainly. Then when we look around the 4-5 term, you can see a lot of red to orange even with Joe Burrow there, a little bit possibility of Joe Burrow being available. But I got to say, over the last month, Joe Burrow's ADP has climbed. George Kittle's ADP has definitely climbed. So these guys are becoming less and less available here at the 4-5 turn. George Kittle starting to go earlier 4th round, even late 3rd, I see sometimes, and have been tempted to draft him there. But Sam Laporta, if you're a believer in Sam Laporta, then hey, he's probably going to be available here. You could probably take him with your 5th round pick here. I don't like that. I don't think you're getting enough of an advantage at the position compared to what you can get later at the position. However, I do have him in a tier of his own, so it's somewhat, if you're a Sam Laporta believer, there you go. This would be your plan, is to get Sam Laporta at this point in the draft then, because he should be available for you. But for me personally, I'm saying the only reason I'm going to take a tight end or a quarterback in this draft, because I don't like taking these guys, the 6th, 7th, 8th round tight ends and quarterbacks. I just don't like taking them in this draft. You are going to be able to get a quarterback who's going to be just as good as these guys, especially in the week that you happen to go up and face up against them. It's going to be random on which one of them does better, or just based on which one of them had the better matchup that week. For the most part, they're going to be the same for you season long. So I don't like spending a pick on the top of that tier in the 6th, 7th round when I can get a quarterback tight end that's going to be equally as valuable for my team 9th, 10th, 11th rounds. Even later in the draft, potentially, if you happen to hit on somebody. So I just don't really like taking this area. But here, if George Kittle makes it to me in that 5th round pick, I'm definitely tempted to take him. Probably going to be taking him. If Jalen Hurts or Joe Burrow are available, they're on my board. It depends what else is available at the other positions. So you can't bank on quarterback, tight end based on my opinions here. But maybe you'd be able to pop off on one 4th, 5th round. We're not going to see that happen in any of the test drafts that I do here. For the most part, I am going into my draft expecting to be taking a later quarterback and a later tight end or two if I am picking from this area of the draft. That is my draft plan going in. Now, I've explained to you. Theoretical idea here is that we want to set ourselves up for this 6th, 7th round to nail that. So we want to work backward from this portion of the draft to figure out what our early draft strategy is. We're going to start there, then we're going to glean some information from that, and we'll come up with a plan going the other way around, based on what do I think is most valuable here, what's best available here, and then based on what I've taken, what do I need, and what do I like on the board. By the time that we get to picks 6 and 7, we're going to test both of those out, show you the draft on each side. I think there's some strengths and weaknesses to each of those that we'll go over, as well as looking at if we went quarterback first round, because you will see I have us going wide receiver first round both times. So when we work from backwards, what I came up with was wide receiver flex is probably going to be our best strategy here. I look at the wide receivers, I look at the running backs. I feel equally pretty good about some of the wide receivers and some of the running backs that are going to be available here. And I don't have a strong love for each. I also think our fallback plan is maybe running back if Tony Pollard, Caleb Johnson are available, if Chris Godwin, if Calvin Johnson, Chris Olave, even George Pickens didn't make it on this list. George Pickens is available there. I like those guys quite a bit, probably going those guys if I've set myself up to be able to go one of those guys. So I ended up with wide receiver flex as my primary strategy here, running back as the fallback plan if things don't go quite right at the wide receiver position and there's more running backs available. I'm comfortable taking Brian Robinson and Tony Pollard or something like that. Then for the 4th, 5th round, I'm looking at running back flex, just kind of the opposite of that. DK Metcalf, Courtland Sutton, please give me one of those. I have concerns about DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, Flowers, Worthy. I am a little bit higher up on Worthy now. Tedrow McMillan I am pretty cool with. Maybe I'm a little bit lower on him, not by much, than ADP. So he just doesn't become my target over some other guys that I really want at the running back position. So running back's the one that I know between Harvey and TreVeyon Henderson, basically. I know there's going to be a running back that I'm going to be happy to take here. And I would be fine going running back. But I want to keep myself open because I might go running back in the next round, right? Even so, it's going to be running back flex because if DK Metcalf's available especially, I'm probably smashing on that. DK Metcalf I would have the highest out of all this for the most part. I think the opportunity is great. It's not that I don't have any concerns for that. Then for the 2nd round, 3rd round turn, I went wide receiver, running back as my primary strategy here, with the fallback of wide receiver, because remember, we might be a little bit heavy on running backs late. So I am totally happy just going wide receiver if Drake London, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, if two of those three make themselves available around that turn, yeah, please give me that. If it's JSN, T. Higgins, I'm a little less high up on that than Ladd McConkey. However, I am now a little less confident in Ladd McConkey with the addition of Keenan Allen. And then, of course, Rashawn Slater doesn't help the passing game going down, but I do think Joe Alt moving over to left tackle could clear that up well enough that it's not something that we truly feel. So it depends who's available, as is always the case, but I also really, really like the running backs, and they're also quite available, especially these three. Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, Chase Brown, half PPR especially for Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, full PPR especially for Chase Brown, but even half PPR especially for Chase Brown. I want Chase Brown. If I can get Chase Brown around here, I want. So I want wide receiver, running back, but if the running backs get a little bit picked over, or if one of the wide receivers happens to fall a little bit further than they're supposed to via ADP, and then Ladd McConkey is available around the other turn, I'm at a crossroads. If it's Ladd McConkey and Chase Brown, and I already took Drake London or A.J. Brown, I guess I'll probably go Chase Brown. But if Chase Brown's gone, I might just go wide receiver there once again, knowing that I could pummel some running backs late, because we are going to start out with wide receiver, as I talked about to begin with. So what does this draft look like when we have worked backwards? We start off with wide receiver, go wide receiver, running back flex, wide receiver flex at the next following turns. Well, to begin, Jefferson or Lamb, my preference is Lamb. Jefferson has the higher ADP currently. That might swap based on the injury situation with Jefferson and some extra love going towards Lamb-ish. The wide receiver, the wide receivers of Dallas, slowly their opinions have risen a little bit. So I'm going to start off with one of those, then wide receiver, running back. With this pick, I had to make a decision at pick 2. I had to play the odds. I had to work my tiers to try to get the best 2 options available. So what I did with that is I went Chase Brown in the second round there over Ladd McConkey, knowing that Ladd McConkey would probably be gone. Because the decision between the two came down to everything going on there with the Chargers. And then Ladd McConkey also, on top of that, he is currently injured. He is currently missing practices. So with everything else going around that, I just felt like Chase Brown was the safer pick. And the odds of getting JSN around the next turn, my next favorite wide receiver target, were higher than they were of Kyren Williams making it to my next pick. So I just tried to play the odds, and it did work out like that. I ended up getting JSN with my 3rd round pick. So the 4th round, we're looking at running back flex, 4th, 5th round. And for my 5th round pick, there were plenty of running backs in that tier. Henderson was the highest. There were so many running backs that it made my 4th round pick easy to go DK Metcalf first, because by the numbers, there was going to be a running back that I had in the same tier available. DK Metcalf, however, I have clearly ahead of the other wide receivers available. So I went DK Metcalf with the 4th round pick, and then I'm just trying to pick what the masses would probably pick most often. TreVeyon Henderson had the highest ADP of the other running backs available. I have RJ Harvey still ahead of Henderson, and so maybe I would have gone a different route there, but I'd be fine with Henderson anyway. So my first 2 running backs, Chase Brown, TreVeyon Henderson. Running backs, Lamb, JSN, DK Metcalf through my first 5th rounds. 6th, 7th round comes around. The plan here is wide receiver flex. The backup plan is running back. When I looked at the running back board, I wanted 2 wide receivers here. And this is where, you practice your strategy. You see what does work, what doesn't work. And between Ridley, Pickens, and probably Chris Olave being available, Waddle, once again, I'm warming up on just fine. I wanted to get 2 wide receivers. Specifically, I did want to get Ridley and Pickens. But I should need a running back here, because I've only got Chase Brown and TreVeyon Henderson. So ultimately, I almost should have gone running back here, right, based on what I've drafted so far. However, Couldn't do it. Could not do it. George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, too tempting for me. And I wanted to see, well, what does my running back room look like then if I do this? So my wide receiver room looks like Jefferson/Lamb, JSN, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley. Meanwhile, my running back room is Chase Brown, who I think could very well be a top 6 tight end. Running back, he was like number 2 last season in the games where he was the bona fide starter there. So he definitely has that upside. And then TreVeyon Henderson, my RB2. The other running backs I was able to get, now obviously I just had a shotgun approach at running back, were Tank Bigsby, Jaden Blue, Jerome Ford, and Trey Benson. So I got myself some floor in case TreVeyon Henderson isn't reliable early season in like a Jerome Ford or hopefully Tank Bigsby as well there early season. Just some floor along with a couple more shots in the dark with Jaden Blue and Trey Benson that could be names, could not matter as well. Jaden Blue, especially full PPR, would be somebody who might have a little bit more potential value to his name, more playability. Regardless, that's my running back room. Chase Brown, TreVeyon Henderson, Tank Bigsby, Jaden Blue, Jerome Ford, Trey Benson. I'm comfortable enough with that. I can make it work with that. And hopefully something hits there. Hopefully TreVeyon Henderson is the one who hits there, right? And then for my quarterback, I got Justin Herbert. My tight end, I got Tyler Warren. Didn't need to take another wide receiver. And for this roster, Jefferson, JSN, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, it's probably going to be a bit of a headache throughout weeks where they're all healthy and all available. However, you got bye weeks, you got potential injuries. So I know I'm going to be set up to where I should hopefully only ever need to play 2 running backs, and I've taken a bunch of shots between Chase Brown, Henderson, Bigsby, Blue, Ford, and Benson to hopefully be fine there. Went late quarterback, late tight end. I'm fine with that. And so that is what that roster ends up looking like. Now, let's see if we like going forward roster, which we started off wide receiver. Then, I mean, I'm willing to go running back here, followed by wide receiver, running back, and then wide receiver, because we know that I like the wide receivers that are available at this point in the draft. We know that I'll probably like a wide receiver available here. And so, and we're starting off wide receivers. So this was when we could pound town that running back position early. And that is what we will do. So from that strategy, I ended up with JJ or Lamb. I'm picking from the 3 spot, by the way, when I did these mock drafts on Fantasy Pros Fantasy Mock Draft Simulator. So JJ or Lamb, both were available. And then Pickens was my wide receiver too, because we didn't take one till later. So I actually popped off at Pickens around the 4-5 turn. And then I got Waddle Ridley around the 6-7 turn because I have an idea of, based on the ADPs, that was the best way to play it, and that's what I got. And like I said, I've been warming up on Waddle. And then for the running back position, we get a little bit stronger there. So start off with Chase Brown again, Breece Hall or James Cook, whichever one you prefer for my RB2, and then James Conner, who's going to bring me plenty of flexibility, maybe even be my RB2 over Breece Hall or James Cook is a possibility. But nonetheless, we've got 3 good running backs to work with there, and we've got 4, hopefully, good wide receivers with a little bit of more risk unknown there between Pickens, Waddle, Ridley compared to JSN, DK Metcalf, Pickens, Ridley. So the rest of the draft here, I end up getting Khalil Shakir, Matt Golden, Jaden Blue, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Dalton Kincaid. I prefer over Tyler Warren myself. So that is that roster. Now, when I look at these 2 rosters and I compare them to one another, I feel like when we draft forward the mock draft that I just looked at there, Lamb, Pickens, Waddle, Ridley, what I think I have here is a higher floor roster, especially when Lamb and Pickens are my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 potentially there. I don't necessarily love that, but I am willing to have that if it must be that way. I still believe in Pickens and everything. And then I got Waddle Ridley, I think could come in and help me during like bad matchup weeks or something where I just want to play Lamb and not play Pickens, or if that's just not working out so well for me. But that also contributes to that high floor. I also took potentially James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir. If I would have actually taken James Cook for sure there, I probably maybe change out Khalil Shakir for a different draft pick. But also, Shakir, nice high floor there in case things, Waddle doesn't work out, Ridley doesn't work out, Pickens is a little bit too uneven. Hey, I've got Khalil Shakir, should give me a nice floor to work with this roster. Matthew Golden, give me hopefully somebody who could provide some pop as the season goes along as well. And then the running back room, I only took 5 in this case, but Blue Eckler provided me with some sort of receiving floor, I think, at the very least, in case I run through any kind of injuries with the running backs or emergency situations. That roster, I think, has a better chance than the other roster of making it to the playoffs. But if the other roster hits, I do think that roster has a little bit of a better chance of winning a championship, which... Personally, I want to make the playoffs first and then try to win a championship. I think it takes skill to make the playoffs and luck to win a championship. Which one do you like better? I would be curious to know. And we have one more roster to look at, and that is going to be, what if we go with the running back first from pick 3? Bijan Robinson was available in this sample draft that I did at pick 3, so I went with Bijan Robinson. And then around the next turn, I go Ladd McConkey, JSN, 2 wide receivers there. And then I got RJ Harvey and would have been Pickens probably around the next turn, or maybe Pollard at that point. So let's just go. My wide receivers were Ladd McConkey, JSN, Pickens, Olave, and then I took Trey Harris. I don't necessarily mind that with Ladd McConkey, since I did have a strong enough JSN, Pickens, Olave. I feel like between those 3, I could start all 3 of those even, hopefully if things work out right. So Trey Harris is just one of those flyers. I could always drop him, but hoping for some late season success. Also, Ladd McConkey gets injured or something. Maybe that increases his value that week. Of course, Keenan Allen's right there to pick up from where Ladd McConkey drops off, so... Who knows? It'll just depend on how good Trey Harris is, ultimately. But maybe I should have gone a different route there than Trey Harris, since I had Ladd McConkey. And then for the running backs, I went Bijan Robinson, Harvey, Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson, Trey Benson, Braylon Allen. That's, I think, a pretty darn good running back room. Pollard, even Ramondre, should be available for me early season at the very least, while we wait and see exactly what we have in Harvey while he ramps up and probably starts to hit his stride week 5, 6 or something like that. So I like how that flows. Tight end, I got Kincaid, and the nice thing about this roster was I found it more easy to go quarterback a little bit earlier. So I have Dak Prescott like significantly a tier ahead of Justin Herbert. Not that I'm down on Justin Herbert by any means, but quite high on Dak Prescott. And so I was able to pop off on Dak Prescott on this roster, so I like that a little bit better than the other 2 rosters with Justin Herbert. I think he has significantly much more upside on a week in and week out basis. So what do you think? Do you like that roster the best? I feel like that roster kind of has like that safer floor thing, but it doesn't quite offer the same pop, of course, not having any CeeDee Lamb at the top of the draft, but I have that with Bijan Robinson, on the other hand, in the running back room. So that was Ladd McConkey, Jason Pickens, Olave, Trey Harris, Bijan, Harvey, Pollard, Ramondre, Benson Allen, Kincaid, and Prescott at the quarterback tight end. I don't know. Which one do you think is the best roster out of those 3 rosters? That might help you decide how exactly you want to approach this draft. There you go, one more time on the screen if you want to kind of formulate your own draft strategy from what you can see there. That is it. Thank you very much. There will be a video at the end of this week, Friday, probably. 12-team late round draft strategy. Wednesday, 10-team mid-round draft strategy. That should be it. Peace out.